Hello and welcome to Newspeak, our weekly look at the news agenda. We're all back together. I'm very pleased to say, after a bit of kind of instability over the past month, welcome to Rafe Hadel-Mancu, Senior Fellow and Royal Historian, Amy Gallagher of Stand Up to Oak and, of course, of the NCF, and Philip Kisley, Dr. Philip Kisley, Senior Fellow and Cultural Historian. Now, and also another title now, which brings me on to this. Before we talk about the various events of the week, Philip here is our new national organiser, Philip. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Peter. Yes, this is for NCF Locals. I'm the new fella in charge. So if you are interested in joining this amazing grassroots movement, then go onto the website and have a look at the details and join us and let's meet up soon.
Yeah, buy him a drink and then get an audience. But Philip, you know, you're now obviously coordinating the whole thing. Without hiding your light under a bushel, we've actually got our first locals conference coming up at the end of this month, haven't we?
We've got a conference coming up in Salisbury, isn't it, at the end of this month. So that's going to be absolutely fascinating. We've got lots of other stuff happening as well. I'm in conversation with lots of the branch organisers, and it's a bit of a it's a move on to the next stage, let's say, because the previous organiser, Stephen Ballock, has just done such a fantastic job.
Oh, Stephen, great.
Yeah, that we're ready to kind of develop in terms of what we're doing, but also grow as well, because we want some new branches. So it's really, really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Rafe, you're going to be speaking at this. It's about the Magna Carta, isn't it?
Yes, so Salisbury, 29th of March, Magna Carta and the Making of the English. A great lineup. David Starkey, who, of course, has written about this extensively. Professor, I don't want to go through the whole list, but there's some very, very distinguished speakers who'll be there.
Robert Adam, the architect.
Robert Adam, the architect as well, one of the historians from History Reclaimed, which of course is pushing back against all of the left-wing rewriting of history and historical revisionism and so forth. So it should be a rather splendid day, and it's taking place in a wonderful ancient... And we chose Salisbury, of course, because it's home to one of the 4 original copies of the Magna Carta.
But unfortunately, it's sold out. Sorry, after having said all that, it's sold out. But anyway, before we talk, Philip, we've got some locals events that you've entered.
Yeah, there are some locals events in March as well, which aren't sold out. So if you're around Birmingham, there's an informal social. That's on the 9th of March. On the 12th of March, there's London South East. There's a meet-up there at 7 o'clock. So we had one group for London, and now because it's so big, we've split it up into 4. There's Lincoln on the 13th of March, which is a monthly meet-up there. Southend on the 13th as well. That's another meet-up. And this is with this band, this local band, which I'm really fascinated about because they've been cancelled. So that might be interesting. They're there and they're going to talk about their experience. Beaconsfield on the 20th, and that's with Ben Habib. Manchester on the 22nd, and finally Southampton on the 25th of March. So all of those meetings are happening this month. If you want to know any more, as I say, go to the website and sign up to Locals. We'd be really pleased to have you.
Well, you can email locals at newcultureforum.org.uk to get in touch, and they're all obviously free of charge as well.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Yes, indeed. Thanks very much for that, Philip. Thank you. I want to start with, well, the important events have been really crowding the week, actually, one way or another. We're going to start, Amy. There's been an attack, as I see it, or an undermining on one of our basic legal principles in this country this week, hasn't there?
Yeah, equality before the law. This is the news that the Sentencing Council, which is a legal body separate from the government, have come up with these guidelines for these pre-sentencing reports that can be written up and given to a judge before a sentence is given to a criminal. And they outline that only certain groups can have access to this pre-sentencing report. And it's quite unbelievable to see it in writing because they specify that this can only apply to women. It applies only to ethnic minorities, cultural minorities, whatever that is, religious minorities, young people between the ages of 18 and 24, and then it has other identities like trans and neurodiverse for some reason.
But disability?
Yeah, well, it's weird. I mean, it doesn't take all the protected characteristics of the Equality Act, which is already a kind of a mess anyway, but it actually names specific groups. So, like, even if you're, obviously a man wouldn't be entitled to a pre-sentencing report going by the sentencing. It's just it's amazing that they've just been so brazen in showing this, because I mean many people point out that the Equality Act under like the category of race, for example, is often discrimination only against certain races that's taken seriously by the judiciary, but they won't say that. But in these guidelines they actually are saying that you have to be a minority, you have to be a woman, and the claim that they are making is that if you fall into these groups you're more likely to experience disadvantage, you're more likely to have had something done to you by the system, which means in other words, you have an excuse for committing your crime. So this totally undoes the idea of agency, that we have free will, that, how far do you go with that? Because anybody could claim that something happened to them that made them commit a crime. And as I said at the start, it undermines equality before the law. So it's huge. I mean, it was Robert Jenrick that pointed this out, and he's been doing a lot to push back.
When you say pointed it out, Amy,
yeah.
Was it something going ahead that they just kept quiet or something?
Yeah, I feel. Well, I hadn't seen it in the press. I mean, everyone now is coming out. Even Labour, Shabima Mahmood MP came out and said that actually she rejects this. She's not going to do it. But she would have known about this, or people around her would have known that this was going to be released. So I wonder if that they've realised that there's such a backlash that they just can't get away with this. And she's saying she's going to write to this sentencing council and put pressure on them to drop it. But it's amazing that they thought that they could go ahead with it anyway.
Hello, please excuse this brief interruption, but I'd be really grateful if you could please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. Our mission is vitally important, and we must grow this channel to ensure that our content reaches the biggest possible audience. The best way to do this is for you to subscribe. It's totally free. And in addition to subscribing, if you're able to donate or join our membership scheme, please click on the link in the description or visit our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. We've got great plans ahead, but we can't do it without your support. From only £4 per month, you'll receive a range of perks and benefits, including exclusive content. Thank you.
I think that's the key thing here, is that we have outsourced our legal system to quangos, because there's actually the Sentencing Council who has come out with these guidelines.
Who's on that?
The Sentencing Council, they are distinguished judges, barristers, lawyers of some repute and some renown. Although, as we know, of course, these days there's been a huge capture of our legal system, and so many of the people on the judiciary now, of course, have ideological biases, which we can see in evidence in rulings and so forth. And so now, even though, Labour understands how dynamite the whole notion of two-tier justice is. We saw the riots in Southport and all of this. And so, with Jenrick having lit the touch paper on all this, Keir Starmer and Labour really aren't happy with this either. But the Attorney General is hamstrung, because the Sentencing Council have said that they're digging their heels in, and they have justified what they've done, and they said they have no intention of changing it. So it now comes, Parliament is ultimately sovereign, and Parliament needs to take action here. But it just goes to show you the damage caused post-Blair with essentially taking power away from the people, putting it into the unelected, unaccountable hands of bodies like this. Now look, pre-sentencing reports have a long history. This is not a new thing. Pre-sentencing reports exist to try to put into context the background of a person, and usually it was always justified if a person has been abused all their lives and they're a young person, or if they are, if they have some mental health issues, or if a woman is in extreme poverty and she steals baby formula for her child.
Old school
all
mitigation.
That stuff comes into play. But that should apply across the board to everybody, irrespective of your identity, right? These factors are not dependent upon race and ethnicity. And I heard this morning on Radio 4, the Baroness Kennedy, a woman with whom I've never agreed in my life, and she once again said, well, this is because higher numbers of ethnic minorities are convicted of crimes and arrested for crimes. And she said, well, any attempt to suggest that there's increased criminality in those groups is obviously wrong. And I said, well, actually, no, because we have the data on all of this now. The charts have been published. They're not exclusive to this country. We can see in Denmark and Sweden and so forth. We know by a vast number, by a vast expanse, crimes are committed, far more by people from North Africa and from the Middle East and Pakistan and Bangladesh than they are from other areas of the world, including from India as well as other places in the West. We know what's causing all of this, and yet this is yet again a deliberate attempt to pretend that reality is not reality.
Yeah. So it's a bit like actually imposing DEI in the judiciary.
I was just going to say, this is the logical conclusion, isn't it? To that? This is the DEI logical conclusion. It's enshrining victimhood in the law, isn't it? And it can only ever go, you look at this and you think, what could possibly go wrong? Absolutely everything. But it is that whole thing. It's DEI, but it's now in the criminal justice system. I've spent so much time. The amount of times I've been on interview panels in the past for the public sector, where the spec for the job is we're particularly keen on applicants from diverse backgrounds. In other words, white men do not apply. So the next stage to white men do not apply is white men go to prison, do not pass go, do not collect £200. And this is potentially terrifying, isn't it? We're talking, bubbling in the background is this notion of, how far away or how close are we to a civil war, right? And this is not something that's way out of, that crazy people are talking about. This is just generally accepted now, I think, as we are going in that direction. We're on that road, and it's going to be very, very difficult to move us away from that road. I can't think of anything that will accelerate us more than removing equality before the law and choosing a particular type of person, i.e. white men, to be a scapegoat.
Fact is, when you see this, what are the chances of this not happening, actually, realistically?
Well, it depends on how determined Labour is to quash it. But as it stands, it's going to stand. And what's more remarkable is that this went out to consultation. So it wasn't just the Sentencing Council, which are 15 people. They went out and consulted, and it shows you when they live in their own echo chambers, that nobody flagged this up as somehow being controversial. Because, of course, it's not just about the injustice. It's about the fact that justice is seen to be biased. And, the reputation of the legal system is already being jeopardized, and its public trust is already weak in our institutions. And nobody in the wider circle of consultations flagged that either. That shows you that the rot goes across such a vast expanse of our elite circles.
And of course, but of course it's the perfect way to tamper with the data, because they are actually going to have to release data at some point, aren't they, of who's doing what, where and when. And we talked particularly about the sexual abuse data, and we made the brilliant film on that. When they do have to release data, full disclosure, then if they're only putting white men in prison, then that's going to suit their aims completely, isn't it? It's just so awful from start to finish. And the more you think about it, the more, I'm trying to think of a word for it, the more dastardly the whole thing is. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, you do feel like things are on an edge. When you were talking about civil war, you do think there's nothing that could be worse for race relations than to make a group feel that they are being treated unfairly and to pit the races against each other, that you get one certain treatment and the other person doesn't. It's just, we're already on edge as it is, and this is just kind of one step to a kind of breaking point, it feels to me.
Interesting you say that. I interviewed for this week, is going out tomorrow, Professor David Betts, who is a specialist on modern warfare and particularly on insurgency and civil wars. That's exactly what he said. Actually, there are 3 stages, and that the first stage is defensive. And what arises there is when the majority or a particular group feels that they are being systematically, as he put it, downgraded. Well, I think we're more than there, aren't we? But alongside that, though, actually, these are all basically attacks on the very heart of our legitimacy. To me, if we know that that is how the law is operating, to me it makes it illegitimate.
Well, it's the pride of our countries, isn't it? Equality before the law.
Yeah.
You know, you think of Lady Justice with the scales of justice,
Yes.
who, you know, blinded, she can't see who the perpetrator is, and that's something we're proud of. And you just think, gosh, do we really know what we're messing with here? It's so fundamental.
And it's one of the things that has kept us stable as a society. We haven't been a revolutionary society because, yes, justice is imperfect and the system is imperfect, but at least it tries to at least go some way towards being fair. And I think that's the difference between us and other countries. We in other countries is that very thing. You know, we are not a revolutionary society, but something has changed and we are becoming a revolutionary society. That's terrifying.
The thing is that this is all happening, carrying on. Okay, right, they're trying not to take it on board and everything. But at the very time that most people are saying, oh, we've turned a corner, you know, we've turned a corner on woke, we've turned a corner on this, that and the other, it's all going out the door. Oh, I don't think so. All I would say is this is all very official, isn't it? This is official stuff. This is legal system we're talking about.
Well, the quangos are really, they're a law unto themselves, and that's the real issue. And they are so embedded with their own blinkers, and they've essentially indoctrinated themselves that it's going to take much more than just simply, you know, electing a Trump character here to deal with all of this. You simply need to have a complete root and branch reform of the fundamental structures of our society. Well, you know, and as everyone said, it was Tony Blair who outsourced this, and the Tories did nothing more. You know, I mean, Quango appointments are announced in the Guardian newspaper, you know. That's something that, you know, David Cameron should have stopped doing. Instead, he put the pedal to the metal. Look, woke is in reverse in America. There is every hope that that's going to have some ripple effects in Europe, and we're already seeing some evidence of that. But what we're talking about here is so deeply structural, it's not going to be just because the vibe changes. This needs to have proper reform.
Yeah, I think this is what people don't understand, and conservatives in particular are guilty of this. They're guilty of not looking at the detail. Okay, and when you look at the detail, you realise how complex, deep and nuanced all of this stuff is, and trying to untangle it and trying to reverse and change in terms of philosophy is a huge thing. Don't forget, we've educated a couple of generations of people now in this ethos. So there's a huge amount to untangle. There's a huge amount to change. And we need to deal with the details. It needs to be a fundamental approach. Yes, it's not about vibe. It's about working hard.
Yeah, I think the main problem, we do need to do that. I think the main problem for people like us, in fact, I would say for most people, is that we have a media which presents all this stuff in a kind of very, very half-baked way, and probably in a favourable way. That's the biggest thing. We've got a big slice, the message carriers. I don't know what people are going to think this is, you know. If you read a paper, you're still going to possibly get a different view.
Yeah.
But people don't read papers now so much, and they get it all from the TV news. Anyway, something else that's been on the TV news, and also goes right to the very heart of the establishment, is that this week, just in case you didn't realise, it's been Ramadan. It's also been the beginning of Lent. We had Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday. There's been some comment about the fact that Ramadan seems to be dominating for it. And frankly, it's right at the very heart of our institutions yet again.
Yeah, this is, I think this has been quite an alarming week, really, in the sense that, for want of a better way of putting it, we've seen Islam become the official religion of this country. I can't think of another way to put it, because we have this iftar at Windsor Castle, which I think we touched on last week, actually, where we had the royal couple looking quite hapless in front of mountains of dates. But this isn't the only one of these ritualistic meals that's happening. There is over the next month, there's going to be one happening at the Globe Theatre. There's going to be one at Lord's Cricket Ground. There's going to be one at Trafalgar Square. So all of a sudden, the public space and the public idea of faith is Islam. Now, they're defending this by saying, well, this is interfaith and everybody's welcome, and Christians are welcome as well. But the point is, the dominant faith is Islam here, and minor faiths, as they would call it, like Christianity. Yes, they will condescend to allow them to come into the tent, but this is really frightening, and it's difficult to know what to do about it, really, because it's at the heart of all of the institutions. It's the royal family, it's the government. The only person actually who has come out to say happy Lent and is the Mayor of London. And he's done that again in a condescending way because he feels he can do, because he's a Muslim. So this, again, it goes very deep, it's very complex, and it's very worrying.
Well, it's a bit like being magnanimous about St. George's Day.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Once you've won the battle, you feel you can at least, be kind of nice.
And in other news.
Yes, exactly. Thing is, though, I mean, you mentioned it was a lot more than that, actually, in a way, for it, because there was this ceremony as well in Westminster Hall, the heart of government, at which Keir Starmer did a speech saying how Muslims have been under such pressure in the recent years. I mean, it's an alternate universe stuff, this. In the middle of Parliament, in St. George's Hall in Windsor Castle, hearing the call to prayer. You don't have to be some raving Islamophobe to feel slightly uneasy about that.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, even the royal family Twitter, they put out a kind of happy Ramadan, and they didn't even mention Lent.
No.
And that's the royal family. And you just think, my goodness. I mean, when I was growing up, I came to the church when I was about 14 or 15, and most Christians that I would talk to, their kind of big concern was that we were largely a secular society, and they wanted more people to be religious. And now when I look back, I sort of think I'd much rather have a secular society than an Islamic society. And it does feel like that's the direction we're going in. And you do feel a bit, I know I don't like to use this term, but I do feel a bit kind of like gaslighted by the media and by the politicians, as though this is all just perfectly normal. Like, oh, Ramadan, we all celebrate Ramadan now. You're thinking, no, I didn't growing up, actually. This wasn't something that was normal. You didn't see politicians all coming out saying happy Ramadan and going in an over the top way, and you just think, you wonder what's going on in their minds. Like, do they genuinely think it's a really wonderful thing that we're becoming Islamic?
No.
I mean,
it's virtue signalling of the nth degree, but by virtue signalling they are becoming the useful idiots for the muscular display of a religion that seeks to supplant. Britain is a Christian country. The Church of England is the established church of this country. But you wouldn't know that if you were going to look at any of that. And what gets me, of course, is that the same people, Starmer and all these other characters who are saying happy Ramadan to everybody, these are secularists. Yeah. These are atheists who shun Christianity, who run away from religion in every other context. Remember what happened when Tim Farron was the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, received huge amounts of pressure to resign because he was a Christian. You had, for the SNP leadership, you had this woman who was a Christian, and it was her Christian beliefs that made her unelectable as the SNP leader. And yet suddenly, when it comes to the display of not only a religion, but a religion that is, in very respects, backwards in its views towards liberal progressive values that they espouse, suddenly they're all embracing. And, we're not even yet at a critical mass of the Islamic population in this country. Once you get to a critical mass, things are going to get far worse. But, of course, how do you display dominance? By taking over the public squares. And we see it not only in Ramadan celebrations in these venues, as you've said, we also see it with, people have seen the videos of, thousands of Muslims, men with their shirts off on Westminster Bridge, engaged in some sort of ritual practice. You see that when they close down Whitehall by praying on the streets of Whitehall. There are many places you could do this. This is a completely obvious display of dominance.
It's a display of dominance. When you say virtue signalling, I think that you're letting them off lightly. I think that what it is that with Parliament, they're thinking of their votes. They're thinking of Muslim votes.
Oh, yeah,
Simple as that. With the royal family, and I can't remember a time seeing such hostility actually to what they're doing. It is about survival, in my view. They're thinking, what way is the wind blowing? And you're going to be if not a majority, a huge part. They're under a big misapprehension about that. But that is, apart from the fact that Charles has always had this interest in Islam, no one's denying that. He's entitled to that. But to have this dates thing, where they're doing the dates, then to have the thing in St. George's Hall, and then to have this big, we say Happy Ramadan to the whole world. That's the sort of thing politicians always did, not royal families.
But there's something else underlying this as well, isn't there? And it's the fact that people don't take the Church of England seriously anymore. Okay, so it's kind of a bit of a laughing stock, and they don't take their own faith seriously. I was talking about this to my stepfather, actually, who's a Christian, and he's, well, they take their faith seriously and we don't. What do you expect? And in a way, he's right. But we don't even have, for example, an Archbishop of Canterbury at the moment, because the Archbishop of Canterbury had to resign in disgrace. What's going on there? Are they dealing with that? How are they handling themselves in the public space compared to the insurgent Islam? You know, all of these questions keep popping up into my mind, and I keep saying I'm worried, I'm concerned, because I am. There is nothing there. There is nothing that we cannot, we cannot present who we are. We cannot be proud of our culture if our institutions, and the Church of England is an British English institution, is a laughing stock.
This was the first time, actually. You said it felt like the official religion.
Yeah.
This is only going to get bigger. It's not going to go away now. This wasn't some special year. It's only going to get bigger. And it did feel actually like that. You understand why companies do it, sometimes with laughable results, as we've seen with Tesco's, where they're advertising beer. So come celebrate Ramadan with us. All of that.
Didn't know.
No, yes, they do. But when it comes to the official institutions, I'm sorry, but the anger that one can feel is the sort of anger you get when you feel that you're being utterly betrayed.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. I felt this is betrayal. You are rubbing people's noses in this. And you say about the Church of England, okay, rave points, absolutely. I said, same thing this week myself. They are not even religious people. They don't care about, they don't get, it is entirely a cultural thing. And we are robbed. Aren't we disarmed actually from criticising? When you say, what do you do? It's an odd thing. You sort of look at it and you think, well, how can I get around that? Because you've captured the language.
Yeah.
And this is precisely what's wrong with all of these Islamophobia blasphemy laws. Because, of course, you cannot criticize a religion or an ideology, which is very different from anti-Muslim hatred. Here we are objecting to this overt display of a religious ideology with which we disagree. That is the sort of thing that will be criminalized, and that's why this is so insidious and so sinister. But yes, you're quite right. This is just purely an aspect of survival for the Labour Party, particularly because, of course, they're running scared from this Muslim vote. They want to win back all those people who left them, particularly over Gaza and other things like that. And so they are now bending over backwards to accommodate and win back those Muslims.
And it's just cowardice as well, I think. I mean, it was Wes Streeting. It was Wes Streeting who put a picture of himself in Parliament with lots of Muslims saying we're celebrating Ramadan. And then he added, but he is himself a Christian, And then you think, but why are you doing this then if you're yourself a Christian? And then you realise that Wes Streeting's seat is very narrow in terms of he's facing, an independent kind of sectarian MP who's challenging him, and he may well lose his seat. So he's got to come out and push Islam and Ramadan. But I just think if I was a Christian, I just couldn't do that. And I wonder, I just think how is he able to do that? Is it just about power? Are they just because you do think, well, what have you won? You keep your seat. But then in the longer term, what have you won overall? It just seems to me to be, you've lost your kind of, your morals, and you've lost, the country's going in that direction. So you may stay in power for a little bit longer. But, I mean, how do you look at yourself in the mirror?
Well, they do, quite easily, because they don't have those. They don't have principles and they don't have morals. It is entirely about how have they survived.
And they're only interested in, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and the rest can take care of itself. That's how they think.
Someone actually posted his election result on Twitter, actually, Wes Streeting. Right. And sure enough, it was right down to 600. It was an independent. This is where they're on a hiding to nothing, the Labour Party, because what they're obviously discovering, this is maybe one of the reasons why they're particularly sucking up to them, is that Muslims will probably have their own party by the time we come to 2000 and what will it be, 29? They will.
Yeah, and there's just there's a broader sense of fear of Islam. It's palpable in the institutions. It's palpable in government. It's palpable in the media. I went on this week. I was on GB News talking to Nigel Farage about this, and the response to I said exactly that, and the response has been huge. So I think people know that. We all know that, don't we? But how do we deal with that? What do we do? How do we deal not so much with the pressures from Islamic lobbyists, but how do we deal with the cowards in positions of power?
Well, I'd say that quite simply, sounds stop voting for
Stop
them.
voting for them.
Stop voting for them. I mean, for goodness sake, that's the only thing. By the way, I don't think we mentioned, Sadiq Khan put up Ramadan lights, and meanwhile, at a Christmas fair over in Spitalfields, I think it was at Christmas, one of the traders there let a cat out of the bag and said, we're not actually allowed, we're not really meant to say it's a Christmas market.
Festive market or something like that.
Market, winter market. But anyway, despite all of this, well, I nearly said something profane then. Nevertheless, our leaders are thinking of showing a coalition of the willing. Is that right, Rafe?
Yes, sir. This has been a very interesting 2 weeks where we have now the greatest fissure in the West since the Second World War, with two. Donald Trump is essentially doing what he promised he would do, and essentially he has given Europe the biggest wake-up call in the post-war era, essentially saying on his own that the international world order is dead. The established order created in 1945 has come to an end. And that may be the case. Now, in the past, when you had the New World Order created in 1945, there was consensus around the world that the New World Order had died, and everybody, from the Democrat and Republican, all the political parties agreed. Now we've got one man saying that, and the Republican Party are saying that. I don't think the Democrats necessarily agree with that. Europeans don't agree with that. The question is, can Donald Trump and the Republican Party on his own refashion the New World Order? And will it last beyond 4 years? And that's why I think we're in a very fascinating time, because there isn't consensus about this. Many of our viewers will be on his side about this, but, after 4 years, what's going to happen with the next person in that role? And a lot of the tension, we're too soon into this presidency to understand fully whether Donald Trump is serious about everything he's saying about removing intelligence from Ukraine, removing military support, or whether these are all tactical things designed to bring people to the table and so forth. And there are a lot of people talking as experts saying, well, this is the end of everything. America can't be trusted. Others saying this is pure tactics. Yeah. Nobody outside his circle knows. And I think it'd be a fool to say definitively what's happening. We need to look at this after a Ukraine-Russian peace deal and say, okay, what are the terms of this? Is this a satisfactory thing? Right now, things are very nervous, and it is very worrying. But there's every reason to think, actually, that Trump knows what he's doing. It's still very uncomfortable for Europeans. I don't think, in the old days, you would put pressure on someone like Zelensky behind closed doors. You wouldn't humiliate in public. You wouldn't say he's a dictator. You wouldn't be fast with the truth. You wouldn't lie about the fact that Ukraine started the war and so forth. That's being played out in public, which we're not used to, and it's causing huge damage, actually, I would say, to conservatives outside of America. In Canada, you had a two-thirds majority likely for the Conservative Party of Canada. Now, if they even win the next election, that will be amazing because of what Trump has been saying there. In this country, amazingly, in the last 2.5 weeks, the Reform Party voters have turned against Trump. So that he had 60% support.
Which is extraordinary.
Just a month ago, Trump had 60% support amongst Reform voters. Now I think it's only 20%.
Really?
This is an issue with the messaging here that's emanating from Trump. But look, the man is very popular still at home. So that's the great disparity here. In Europe and in Canada and the Conservatives elsewhere are feeling very nervous. But he is appealing to his home base, and actually he's still having his support there. It's still around 50%. I think it's 44 to 48% of Americans still support him on all of this. And what he's doing is actually working. Look, the Europeans are out to lunch. We need to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. We need to bring them to the negotiating table. Biden and Obama both would have agreed that you need to have territorial concessions. That's just realpolitik. Trump is just saying the things out loud that other politicians were saying in private. But perhaps you don't say those things before you start negotiating. But actually, on the principles of it all, I think Donald Trump is correct. It's the messaging and the way that it's being, because, the people in the Kremlin are having a field day over all this and rubbing their hands in glee. We even hear talk now that Canada may be removed from the Five Eyes, the great,
Oh, and us, surely, as well.
Not us, but Canada may be removed from the Five Eyes, which is absolutely remarkable to think about. These are very worrying times. Trump is doing very well on the domestic front. He did extremely well in foreign policy in his first term. The jury is out now in the second term. We just have to take a step back and basically look at the geopolitics in about 6 months or a year to see where we are.
There are so many parts to this, actually. We can sort of break them down a bit and try and keep on to the particular thing. You mentioned a wake-up call. To me, it's with Europe, it's been slightly satisfying, to see the complacent, these people that laughed at Trump when he talked, for example, about Russian oil coming into Germany. They just sat and laughed. You saw videos of them. They have been able to build these massive, squandering welfare states simply because their defence was taken care of. And that's what's being taken away, isn't it? This is terrible news for Europe. But this level of delusion
it's
that
insane.
you saw at that summit and still going on. And also the kind of way in which commentators, and interestingly also on what you might call our side, are sort of trumpeting, behind the kind of effort and all of this. It's almost like they've been outraged at being told the truth.
Yeah, it just feels as though we're reliving. It feels like Groundhog Day to me, because it's Rafe has just brilliantly outlined the geopolitics of it. The response here from the usual suspects of, the moral frenzy. This is a new thing they can get their teeth into. It feels as though we're reliving BLM, we're trans, lockdown, all of these things that people just go one-dimensional, wholehearted into, and this is the new thing. And if you for 1 minute say, well, hang on, let's just hold on here, because if it comes to a situation where we're putting boots on the ground in Ukraine, then that's incredibly serious. This is Eastern Europe. This is the Russian bear. Have you ever been there? No, these people haven't been there. I have actually been to Ukraine, okay? And it's a terrifying place. I remember coming back over the border to the relative safety and sophistication of Romania. That's how bad it was. But there is this sense, this simplistic, I want a drama from the good people. We want personal drama in our lives, and this is the new one. It happens about once every 18 months. So I say to those people, if you want personal drama in your life, come out as non-binary, okay? It's easier. It's safer for everybody. Just do that, But this is just, it just feels like Groundhog Day to me.
Isn't it sort of also the support of Ukraine amongst many people is actually another way of just simply saying I hate Trump?
Or saying I'm woke, or just being reactionary.
So what are you going to say?
I was going to say, in response to all the drama, this is why I agree with Rafe that the way Trump is doing this so publicly is causing problems, because that interview with him and Zelensky, people have had such a strong emotional reaction to it. And it does mean that we end up getting very quickly into one of these kind of cultural moments where you're either on one side or the other, like the pandemic or like BLM. And I think it is because he has done it so publicly. I do think that these discussions should be going on behind closed doors, and then because when people can see it, they start saying, over the top things like, oh, Zelensky's being bullied, or isn't he strong? Isn't he weak? And I think many people sort of forget that this is a performance, that, people are doing it in front of the cameras. And it just all gets very silly. And you do think, well, hang on, we're talking about war here, and there are people that are losing their lives. And when it becomes this kind of circus...
Sorry, but I agree. But on the one hand, I have to say I found it exhilarating when I first saw it. The mere fact that actually what people usually talk about behind closed doors, I suddenly felt... Because I was also, when you say they might have managed an ambush... but it looked, at least from when I was seeing it, as something that just did erupt, right? It wasn't just like
But
completely...
it was provoked. I mean, that's the thing. The clip that everyone sees looks as if it looks as if Trump and Vance are bullying Zelensky. Well, actually, they were bullying Zelensky. But if you watch the entire 50 minutes, you can see that Zelensky's playing his hand very badly, and he's doing all the things that will rile up Trump and Vance. But unfortunately, and so yes, both sides are right. Zelensky shouldn't have done what he said, but it's quite a situation where you actually have to watch what you're saying in order to avoid annoying somebody who's very prickly. You know, it's almost as if you're paying fealty towards the emperor. That's what when you saw Macron, when you saw Starmer, they had to mind their P's and Q's and be very careful lest they say they put their foot the wrong way. That's not something I'm very comfortable with on the international stage. We don't have a universal world emperor. We shouldn't be dealing with things along those lines. Look, Trump is absolutely right to get the Europeans to pay more money. They have been riding for free on the Americans. That's completely unjustified. The Europeans are out to lunch to think that they can carry on this war in any capacity whatsoever. Trump is correct to bring them down to have peace negotiations. The Europeans, but you don't need to worry about boots on the ground, because you can only get boots on the ground as a peacekeeping mission. They're not going to go into a hot war. Putin's never going to allow British or French troops into Ukraine. This is a complete non-starter from the very beginning. This is just grandstanding. And the worst thing, this is very bad for Europe's doing Ukraine an injustice, because Ukraine is basically being told, we'll be with you, we'll be behind you, but there's nothing behind the Europe.
Exactly. Yes.
There's nothing there at all. They might as well just give Ukraine a reality check and say, you do need to come and negotiate. It's a huge shame that you're being undermined by America publicly like this, and concessions are being made. But the reality is, this is the time for concession. This is the time to come to the table. And let's hope America will actually, once you get to the table, fight your corner properly.
Yeah, but one thing about this is that whichever side, whatever you're coming down on, is that it is marked, and you simply cannot avoid it, that Putin has never been mentioned by.
Yeah.
It's never been criticised. Every single thing that people on the MAGA right. I mean, Douglas Murray, our friend, wrote a very good piece in The Spectator explaining why the MAGA Trumpian right are wrong on Ukraine and why Putin is there. And as I said, every single thing, Ukraine is corrupt. Of course it is. Russia is even more corrupt. Zelensky may have put millions away. There's every reason to believe that Putin is the richest man in Europe, with billions and billions put away in his kleptocracy. Every single thing you can lay against Ukraine, and there are many legitimate criticisms, you can lay tenfold against Russia, and yet there's huge silence about Russia's, record.
But from the top, I mean,
from Trump downwards.
He's been more critical of Zelensky than he has been of Putin, that is a bit of a worry, isn't it?
But I mean, it works in so many ways and on so many levels, doesn't it? And I can't help but listen to Keir Starmer and think about what's being proposed, and everybody is so concerned. I mean, rightly so, about Ukrainian borders, but look at our borders. They've been absolutely porous for the last 30 years. And the people who are, rattling their sabres and banging their drum, would they fight for us? No, of course they wouldn't. So all of this stuff, for me, all of that stuff really leaves a terrible taste in the mouth. And it's those things that I'm kind of thinking about at the moment, and those things are the closest home to me, because it is about us as much as it's about Ukraine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I sort of thought, have I become very parochial, little whatever? But I thought, no, actually. To most people, to a lot of people looking, they will be thinking, you're talking about war? We've got a war here. We've got threats here every day. And in fact, you are the architect, Keir Starmer, of many of this. You and your friends are the architect.
Precisely.
And you have the gall to get up and start saying this is a defining moment. Yeah. When you've actually, the very people who will go off and be boots on the ground probably are people you'd call far-right thugs.
Exactly.
Actually, young working-class white guys on the whole. And the fury and the hatred for these grandstanding people.
Well, there's something really immoral, isn't there? We were talking last week, weren't we, about portraits being removed from number 10, and Churchill has been removed from number 10, and yet here Keir Starmer is, all Churchillian, and this is about, mobilizing our own people, and all of a sudden calling on patriotism. Whenever has he called on patriotism before? It's appalling.
Can we just do one more aspect of it as a political response here, like party political? Obviously, you could say that this could be a nightmare scenario for Nigel Farage in a way, because he's so identified with Trump, as you mentioned. My feeling is that somehow or other he's been handling it very well. He's somehow managed to, walk this line. But it has caused, as you alluded to, Rafe, it has caused this fissure on the right. It's not just a left-wing, right-wing thing, hasn't it? I mean, and I suppose that when you look at Twitter, when you look at social media, a lot of people have very little time for Zelensky. I mean, the implication being is what they're pro-Putin. I don't know. There is this element, obviously, on the right. But, basically, I would have thought that Reform had most to lose, but by Nigel's taking the right course, maybe they'll come off okay out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that is the big danger. We've seen it in Canada, where the leader of the Conservative Party was being seen as a populist. Now, a two-thirds majority may be a minority. And, of course, Trump and Farage are always seen, basically, as, Farage is Trump light. And that's the big dilemma, is are we going to see conservatism or right-wing politics outside of America become a casualty of America first? And the jury is out on that. As I say, a lot of everything we're complaining about Trump could just be tactics rather than long-term strategy. And if it shows in 3-6 months or whatever that actually, in fact, what he was doing was just bullying people onto the table, everything is great, then maybe you'll see a huge surge for the right again. Right now, I think things aren't necessarily that great for the prospects for the right wing.
And because his tactics are different to any other president that ever been before. I mean, watching that footage on Friday, I don't know what you felt, and I don't know what viewers felt, but I felt as I was watching a cross between Goodfellas and The Godfather, the way he was expressing himself, you're not being nice, you're not, there's no respect. And
funny? You think I'm funny?
Yeah. And it was just nothing like I've ever seen before. And it's one of those things. So the usual mechanisms of analysis immediately go out of the window, don't they? Because as he said at the end of it, this will make great television, and it just kind of throws you.
I noticed that, say, like Julia Hartley-Brewer, I'm sure a great friend of ours, but she took this very strong line, didn't she, pro-Ukraine, and it sort of seemed to be rather sort of blind, actually. It was almost like you're either there or you're some appalling kind of fascist.
Yeah, increasingly there's a lack of nuance on Ukraine. And it does feel like there's a section of the right now that is just any kind of mainstream narrative, that there's just a scepticism about everything, and they go down really kind of strange rabbit holes, actually. And then it means that on every issue, people are kind of increasingly on different parts of the spectrum.
I'm probably, guilty of that a bit. You look at, say, people like Mariella Fustrop tweeting, I stand with,
Yeah, but I would say that's very short-sighted, because there's another option rather than, people they say, right, either you're with Zelensky or you're on Putin's side. There's another example here, and it's Poland. No one's going to say Poland is woke. Poland is free from all this nonsense. Certainly, the last governments that we had there under the Law and Justice Party, they see Putin for what he is. They're supporting Zelensky. The Polish leaders are opposed to all the things that we're opposed to. They're opposed to Mariella Fustrop and all these characters. It's a very Western-centric view to say, because you've got these Western leaders supporting Zelensky, that means everything's bad. Actually, the Eastern European countries, places like Poland, which are spending more than America as a percentage of GDP on defense, they know what Russia is like. And they're far more Christian than Russian. So a lot of this stuff, which is Putin's anti-woke, therefore we're with him. Actually, when it comes to Christianity and all these sorts of things, Poland is far more of a guide of how Western civilization should be. The fact that they're supporting Ukraine, I think, is the way what we should be doing.
Did you see that Polish politician talking recently, about, and he was going through he was at a conference. It was on X, just today. And he's going through all the statistics that we highlighted in our Heritage film about sexual assault in Europe, Western Europe. the clarity that comes out of these kind of gatherings. We just have got so unused to it now. Philip, thank you very much. Thanks, Rafe. Thanks, Amy. We're actually going to carry on talking a little bit more, but see you next week. Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programmes, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.